Hi, there are a couple of new coffee presses on the market that I've come across, so I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to look at some of the coffee presses or cafetiers that I've used and put them to the test. So here's the kind of 5 contenders, if you like, on the table in front of me. I've gone for a real simple, this is just a metal, a brush steel, standard cafetiere. It's got the traditional mesh in here with this kind of coil around the outside to produce a bit of pressure. Nothing special about it. Kind of retails around about maybe the 12 to 15 pound mark. This is one of the new ones I've come across, produced by a company called Timemore. It's got an inner typical standard glass vessel with this outer plastic to provide a bit of insulation. And the actual mesh is a bit different. We've got a silicone seal around the outside, and that's to prevent some of those coffee grinds being pushed up the outside and into the cup. It's also got supposedly quite a fine mesh down here. No handle, so it's got a nice little compact design to it. It's selling for about £30. This isn't exactly a coffee press, it's a tea press by Hario. The reason on the table is I have often used it in the past to make coffee. It has got a standard mesh at the bottom. It's quite a fine mesh. The same kind of sprung edges to create a bit of tension. And overall, I kind of like the look of this one, so I've used it quite a bit for coffee. This big beast here is going to brew nearly a litre of coffee for us. And it's from Espro. And one of the beauties of the Espro range of coffee presses is, again, you've got the silicone seal around the outside to prevent coffee being forced up when you plunge, but you've got a very, very fine mesh here designed to keep as much of the sediment out of the coffee as we possibly can. There's also a double filter. So the idea is we're really trying to get rid of that sediment that some people find kind of disturbing when it comes to a cafetiere or coffee press. It's going to go about £70 for this one, and I should have mentioned about £50 for the Hario. And finally, the most expensive on the table is the Fellow Clara. So you're talking the standard version is about £100. This particular one with the wood effect is £130. So considerably more than most of the cafetières or coffee presses on the table. It's got great insulating properties. It's got the same silicone seal around here to prevent those grinds coming up, and a very fine mesh to get rid of sediment. So I'm going to test them across kind of 3 things really. They're all slightly different in their shape and the materials they're made of and so forth. Kind of haven't touched upon that. Simply going to look at temperature loss during the brew cycle, because obviously if you're losing a lot of temperature, then we are going to affect how well the coffee brews. I'm going to look at how much sediment was left in the cup at the end. And finally, we're going to do a blind taste test to see which brews the nicest coffee. I used the Wilfus Fart grinder for this. Kept it a real simple, basic grinder. You know, these are about £100 and they'll do a solid job for something like a cafetiere or coffee press. The only thing of note is that the coffee press setting on here was way too coarse. I did a 3.5 minute brew time. I needed to be more towards the AeroPress setting to get a decent tasting brew out of each of the cafetières. In terms of the coffee, I went for something very much middle of the road. Nothing too acidic, little bit of juiciness in the cup, plenty of sweetness. Finca El Tambo from Guatemala was the ideal fit, I think, for this kind of test. Temperature loss was really interesting. I brewed for 3.5 minutes. I monitored the temperature throughout the brew cycle. I didn't put the lids on any of them because I had a thermometer there. So basically there was potential heat loss through the top. But apart from that, it was the same temperature of water going in and broadly the same level. So I tried to maximize the amount of liquid each of these could hold. The best performing straight off was the Clara. Lost virtually 0 degrees temperature loss during the 3.5 minute brew cycle. Interestingly, I kind of think that maybe the Timemore would have come out a second, but it was the Espro that fared much, much better. Potentially the quality of the glass, potentially just the sheer volume of liquid that was in this particular Cafeteria meant it only lost 1 degree of temperature during the brew cycle. The metal came in next with just a 2 degree temperature drop. Then we had the Timemore at 3 degrees, and the least well performing was the Hario, which lost 4 degrees during the brew cycle. A lot of people find that residual sediment a difficult aspect of drinking a cafetiere or a coffee press. So that was quite important to kind of get a feel of that. And I looked at this, basically it was just a visual thing to see how much was left at the bottom of the cup. The Clara and the Espro did really well here. There was just a bit of minor sediment at the bottom of the cup at the end of drinking it. The Hario and the metal version here, pretty typical, what I'd expect from a basic cafetiere, nothing really between them, and weirdly the Timemore fared the worst. It left more sediment than any of the other cafetieres. So here are the 5 brews. I've written under each cup and where it came from, so I've kept the ratios the same, time the same, the approach the same. It's a nice brew. It's maybe lacking a little bit of fruity juiciness. This one's a bit more to it. There's a bit more acidity in this one, a bit more sharpness in this one. Maybe an acidity that's lacking over here. Quite possibly. That middle one's also a nice one. It's got a good body. There's some nice sweetness coming into the cup there as well. I don't like that one straight away. It's got an aggressiveness. Let's get rid of that straight off. And over here, it's got a juiciness about it that's interesting. It just seems to be lacking something. There's something missing. It's definitely nicer than this one, but it's just lacking something in the finish. You get a nice little juicy burst, and there's something that disappears over here. So I'm down to these 3 here. Let's go through these again. It's nice, it's balanced. It's not over the top in any direction. It's a pleasant brew, that one. There just feels to be a little bit more to this one. It's cooled nicely, it's sweeter. That's kind of coming up front at the moment. Middle of the road, nicely balanced. Maybe not quite as nice as this one, but I really can't tell much between this one over here and this one in the middle. Just go back here. Definitely my favourite on the table. It's got brightness to it. It's got a nice fruity zing to it. There's sweetness there. There's body there. So let's have a look to see where I enjoyed and where I didn't. So let's talk about my favourite first of all. And this was the Clara. So this was the most expensive, the Fellow Clara, the most expensive cafetiere that I had. And I do honestly think that was the nicest brew on the table. These two are very balanced, but not quite as tasty. So here we have the Espro. Again, the second most expensive, coming in second. And this is the Timemore, which for like a £30 cafetiere has done really, really well here. And I've got 2 left. This is the least preferred one. And I'm really surprised by that. That is the Hario tea press. I don't know what it was about that. Maybe because I've been using a tea press for this. Maybe the grid at the bottom, the grill at the bottom isn't quite as good. I don't know. So this must be the metal. Yep, that must be the cheapest. So which would I go for? When I started this whole experiment, I kind of wasn't sure about buying a coffee press for £130. It seemed like a silly amount of money for what is essentially a really, really simple device. But I'm going to be honest and say that I've kind of fallen in love with this one a little bit. It had the best heat retention. It produced very, very minimal sediment at the bottom of the cup. And more importantly, it did produce the best tasting coffee out of all 5 of them. I personally preferred this coffee, and there was a decent difference between them as well. It wasn't a close run thing. This was definitely the best coffee on the table. It costs £30 more for the wood effect. Not sure if that's worth it. You could save £30 and go for the £99 version. But if cafetières and coffee presses are your thing, then just perhaps it's worth spending a little bit more to get a nicer tasting coffee. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Any thoughts, comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you. Your subscribes and likes are really appreciated. Thanks for watching.